The night I finally stopped asking my boyfriend for a kiss. Invisible comments told me he had never wanted to touch me at all. For a year, I had been the one thing Julian Hart could never peel off. I hugged him in my sleep, held his hand whenever we went out, demanded replacement kisses when one felt too short, and once crawled into his lap during a video conference. Because I missed him. Then, as I leaned in for my usual goodnight kiss, words floated across my vision. Someone wake up the clingy supporting character. The male lead is leaning so far back. He's about to become a bridge. He doesn't want her touching him. He only dates her to block his family's arranged marriage plans. The real heroine comes home tomorrow. This needy girl is about to be thrown out. My fingers loosened from Jules' collar. I stepped away and whispered, "Never mind. No kiss." Julian looked down at me, and his eyes abruptly darkened. "Mia," his voice turned dangerously quiet. "What exactly did you just give up on?" Only seconds earlier, I had risen on my toes to kiss him. When the first line appeared over his shoulder, was not my imagination. The sentence hung in the air in sharp black letters, like comments from a live stream, projected directly onto my eyes. Here we go. The supporting girls. Daily harassment of the male lead. She is so clingy. Julian is doing his tactical lean again. And she still keeps coming. Please. He obviously doesn't want her. I froze. Julian still had one hand around my waist. His other rested on the entry table. He had just returned from the office and had not removed his black overcoat. The cold of the winter night clung to him. I had already tugged his tie halfway loose, and his throat moved beneath the light. Normally, I would have launched myself at him by now. I would loop my arms around his neck and beg, like a child asking for candy. "Julian, I need my goodnight kiss." He would usually frown and say, "Mia?" I just walked through the door. Then he would bend down and let me kiss him anyway. Tonight, for the first time, I noticed the instinctive way he leaned back. The movement was tiny but real. His waist shifted away. His shoulders tightened, as if he were enduring something. I had always thought he was shy. With those comments in front of me, I finally understood. Maybe it was not shyness. Maybe it was rejection. Is she finally figuring it out? Too late. Julian only started dating her to keep his family from choosing a wife for him. She's a convenient prop, nothing more. Evelyn Cole, the real heroine, flees home tomorrow. Old money. Brilliant. Shushed. And Julian's childhood sweetheart. What does Mia have beside us? No shame. My breath caught. I slowly released Julian's tie. He lowered his eyes to me. "What's wrong?" His voice held a hint of impatience, as though I had worked him up and stopped halfway. Pain filled my chest, but I made my voice light. "Never mind." His gaze sharpened. "What do you mean, never mind?" I stared at the floor. "I don't need the goodnight kiss." Silence settled over the entryway. Julian watched me. He rarely showed emotion, but at that moment, his eyes looked darker than the night beyond the windows. "Mia?" My heart tightened. "Yes." He pulled at his loosened tie. "What are you upset about now?" "I'm not upset." I shook my head quickly. I truly was not trying to start a fight. I had only realized how ridiculous I had become. I had chased Julian for a long time. To be precise, he had approached me first. 1 year earlier, his family had been pushing him toward a strategic marriage. He suddenly found me and asked whether I wanted to be his girlfriend. That day my supervisor had reduced me to tears. I sat in the emergency stairwell eating a cold sandwich, my eyes red and swollen. Julian stood above me in a perfect suit, remote and expensive, as though we belonged to different worlds. "Mia Bell," he said, "would you like to date me?" I thought hunger had caused a hallucination. Later, he explained that his family would not stop arranging introductions, and that he needed a girlfriend to discourage them. "You won't have any expenses," he said calmly. "I'll respect your boundaries for as long as the arrangement lasts." My overheated brain produced one question. "Am I allowed to hug you?" Julian blinked. "I like hugging people," I added pathetically. He studied me before saying yes. That single word ruined me completely. At first I reminded myself that we had an arrangement, but Julian treated me too well. My stomach was sensitive, so he remembered I could not drink anything iced. I was afraid of the dark, so he left a lamp glowing in the bedroom. When work made me cry, he asked no questions until he had pulled me into his arms. "Go ahead," he would murmur. "No one can see you here." Eventually I forgot the boundary. I forgot that he had begun this relationship to avoid a marriage. I forgot that I was only the person he happened to choose. I mistook tolerance for devotion, silence for permission, and restraint for shyness. I even moved into his penthouse. First I slept in the guest room, then the primary bedroom. Soon I hugged him every night with one leg thrown across his waist. The comments were right. I had become unbearably clingy. Julian remained in the entryway. I retreated another step. "You've worked all day. You must be tired." I won't bother you. His frown deepened. Who said you bother me? Hope lifted its head, but the comments crushed it at once. He's being polite. She isn't going to believe him again. Is she? A man like Julian would never tell her to her face that she's annoying. She's an adult. Take the exit. He's offering. I swallowed every answer and forced a smile. I'm going to bed. At the bedroom door, Julian called after me. Mia. I stopped. You're not waiting for me to shower? I always waited. I would scroll through my phone until the bathroom door opened, then crawl straight into his arms. His hair was wet. I scolded him while kneeling on the bed to dry it. He sat at the edge of the mattress and let me rub the towel over his head. It was my favorite part of every day, but I could not be greedy anymore. No, I'm tired. Julian said nothing. As I closed the door, I saw him standing beneath the entry light with a face gone cold. I had finally irritated him. The door clicked shut. I leaned against it and tears fell. Without warning, the comments continued. At least the supporting girl has developed some Felsen awareness. Stop crying. Leaving early is better for everyone. When Evelyn first. Jillian will finally learn what a comfortable relationship feels like. I wiped my face. Fine. I understood. Starting tonight, I was quitting Julian Hart. My withdrawal failed before sunrise. I spent the first half of the night curled on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch Julian. At some point, I fell deeply asleep. When I woke, I had rolled into his arms and wrapped myself around him. Like an octopus, one hand lay on his waist. My face was buried against his chest. My leg pinned both of his. Terror nearly stopped my heart. Julian was still asleep, without his usual cold expression. His lashes looked absurdly soft against his cheeks. Early light slipped through the curtains and traced his straight nose and unsmiling mouth. Soon this version of Julian would belong to Evelyn. She would not cling to him. She would stand beside him at formal dinners and discuss acquisitions, financing, and equity. All I ever asked was, "Can I hold you for 5 more minutes?" How embarrassing. Holding my breath, I tried to retrieve my arm. His hand closed around my wrist. I went rigid. Julian opened his eyes. Sleep still darkened them. Where are you going? I sounded like a thief caught in the act. Get ready for work. He did not release me this early. I have a class. It's Saturday. I had no answer. The comments laughed at me. She can't even lie properly. She looks like she got caught stealing a kiss. He's probably annoyed that she strangled him in his sleep. Again, he rushed into my face. I yanked my hand away. Then I'll make breakfast. Julian sat up, his hair untidy over his forehead. He watched me before asking, "Why were you so far away last night?" Was I? Yes. Maybe I was hot. He lifted the blanket, revealing how I had stolen most of his side. You rolled back by yourself? Withdraw that attempt day 1. Facture. I wanted the floor to swallow me. Julian caught my chin and made me face him. Mia, what is going on? His palm was warm against my cheek. Before yesterday, I would have rubbed my face into it and told him everything was fine. Now I panicked and turned away. His hand remained suspended in the air. Coldness settled visibly over his face. Nothing. I need to brush my teeth. I scrambled from the bed. Mia. My step stopped. You're avoiding me. I gripped the door handle. No, you'd better not be. The quiet warning tightened something in my chest. In the bathroom mirror, my eyes looked swollen and my face pale. I splashed water over my cheeks and forced myself awake. If I was only a convenient prop, I needed to behave like one. Julian had no obligation to endure my neediness. When I came out, he had changed into a black shirt and dress pants. His sleeves were rolled up as he cooked eggs in the kitchen. He made breakfast most Saturdays. Because takeout was too greasy for my stomach normally, I hugged him from behind and pressed my cheek to his back. Julian, you would make such a good housewife. He always answered, if you can't give a normal compliment, be quiet. He never pushed me away today. I stopped at the kitchen doorway. Julian glanced over. Why are you standing so far away? I don't want to interrupt. His hand paused over the pan. You've interrupted me plenty of times before. The remark should have been harmless. In my ears it became a needle. I lowered my head. I won't anymore. The kitchen went silent. Julian switched off the burner and crossed to me. Mia. That isn't what I meant. I nodded. I know. I knew he had manners. I knew he protected my feelings. Even if he found me exhausting, he would tolerate me rather than say something cruel. That was why I needed to stop at the table. I was unnaturally obedient. Julian pushed warm milk toward me. Drink. Thank you. He put eggs on my plate. Finish those. Okay? I answered every instruction, like a child completing homework under a teacher's eye. His gaze grew darker with each reply. After breakfast, he picked up his keys. Change clothes. I'll drive you to the art studio. I taught weekend classes at a children's art center. I usually loved riding with him. From the passenger seat, I would slip my hand over and lace our fingers together. When he needed both hands to drive, I played with his fingertips. Today, I shook my head. I'll call a ride. Share. Julian looked up. Why? I bit my lip. I think we should maintain a little distance. Distance gave a soft laugh without humor. You slept on top of me last night. And now you want distance? Combs just returned. He's angry because she still has no boundaries. Don't get in his car. Let him pick up Evelyn. The real heroine flies in today. Julian is going to the airport. My heart dropped. Today. I breathed deeply and held back tears. I'll go by myself. Julian watched me, as if testing a theory. Finally, he set down his keys. Fine. Relief passed through me. Then he added, I'll pick you up tonight. You don't need to, Mia. His voice turned cold and final. Do not push this any further. I fell silent. I entered the elevator alone. As the doors slid together, Julian stood in the living room and watched me leave without following. His gaze promised that this question of distance was far from over. Julian's promise to pick me up haunted every class I taught that Saturday. By the time my last class ended, he had failed to appear. I had already ruined 3 demonstration paintings. One child raised his hand. Miss Bell, why does the bunny have eggplants for ears? I looked down. It did. The bunny is having a bad day. The boy nodded gravely. Did its girlfriend break up with it? I stared at him. Were children always this perceptive? At 6, I stepped outside the studio and looked toward Julian's usual parking space. Empty. I should not have been surprised. The comments had begun updating me. At 4, Dylan went to the airport for Evelyn. The jilted sweethearts are reunited. It must be beautiful. Is the supporting girl still waiting? How sad. She can't seriously think she competes with Evelyn. I told myself to leave, but my feet remained planted. 10 minutes passed while the wind chilled my fingers. Julian did not come. The last of my hope died. Miss Bell. I turned to continue my walk, but my footsteps faltered as Mrs. Gable, the studio director, hurried out of the warm lobby behind me. You forgot your woolen scarf, dear, she said, wrapping the soft, faded pink knit around my neck. Her hands were warm and smelled of cinnamon tea. And don't look so down. The weather is dreadful today, but tomorrow always brings a clearer sky. I managed a small, trembling smile. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. As she turned back inside, the heavy glass doors clicked shut, isolating me once more in the gathering dusk. The wind cut through my thin coat, but the chill inside my chest was far worse. I looked down at the empty space, where Julian's sleek black sedan usually idle-purred against the curb. The asphalt was bare, dark with the dampness of the approaching winter evening. Over my shoulder, the invisible text flickered, casting a faint, ghostly glow across my field of vision. Look at her, still standing there like a stray dog waiting for a scrap. Evelyn's flight landed 2 hours ago. Julian probably didn't even remember he had a girlfriend to pick up. The childhood sweetheart always wins. Mia was just a shield. Now that the shield isn't needed, she's just clutter in his life. The words stung, sharp as ice needles. I closed my eyes, trying to block them out, but they appeared behind my eyelids anyway, scrolling past in relentless, silent mockery. I took a deep breath, the freezing air burning my throat. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep waiting for a man who had already moved on to the correct page of his story. I turned away from the empty street and walked toward the subway station. The subway ride back to the penthouse was loud and suffocating. The screech of metal on metal echoed my internal panic. Every time I looked at the dark windows of the train, more comments drifted across my reflection. She's actually going back to his place? Is she going to beg him not to throw her out? How pathetic. If I were her, I'd pack my bags and disappear before he can officially dump me. Don't worry, she's a supporting character. They never have any self-respect until they're forced to leave. No, I thought, gripping the cold metal pole of the train. I have self-respect. I need to gather my things. When I finally reached the penthouse, the silence of the high-rise building was deafening. The security guard at the front desk, who usually smiled and greeted me warmly, gave me a polite but slightly strained nod. I wondered if he already knew. Had he seen Julian leave earlier? Had he seen Julian with someone else? I rode the private elevator up in silence. When the door slid open directly into the living room, the apartment was dark and completely empty. Usually, the lights would be dimmed, and the scent of Julian's expensive wood smoke cologne would linger in the air. Today, the penthouse felt like a museum, cold, pristine, and devoid of life. I walked into the bedroom. My heart beat a frantic, uneven rhythm in my chest as I pulled my old duffel bag from the top shelf of the closet. I looked at the wardrobe. On one side hung Julian's immaculate, custom-tailored suits in shades of midnight blue, charcoal, and black. On the other side were my clothes, mostly soft, oversized sweaters, colorful skirts, and paint-stained jeans. Next to them were the expensive silk dresses and cashmere coats Julian had bought for me, insisting that his girlfriend should only wear the best. I didn't touch any of the expensive things. I only packed the items I had brought with me a year ago, along with a few cheap sweaters I had bought with my own salary. I left the diamond necklaces, the designer bags, and the delicate pearl earrings he had placed on my nightstand over the months. They didn't belong to me. They were props loaned to a temporary actress. As I zipped the duffel bag, my hands shook so violently I could barely align the metal tracks. Oh, she's actually packing. Color me surprised. Finally, some character development. But wait, is she going to leave a dramatic note? She shouldn't leave a note. Just slip away. Let Julian realize she's gone. It's more satisfying that way. I stared at the writing desk. I didn't want to write a long, emotional letter. Julian hated unnecessary drama, and I didn't want to leave him with the impression that I was trying to guilt him. I took a small piece of scrap paper and wrote a simple, clear message. Julian, thank you for taking care of me for the past year. I'm grateful for your kindness, but I think it's time for me to return to my own life. I've taken my things and left the keys on the kitchen counter.
Please don't worry about me.
I wish you all the best.
Mia.
I placed the note on the marble kitchen island, resting his spare set of keys directly on top of it. I took one last look around the penthouse. The kitchen where he had boiled warm milk for my sensitive stomach. The living room sofa, where I had curled up against his chest, reading while he worked on his tablet. The floor-to-ceiling windows where we had watched the city lights together. It had felt so real. I dragged my heavy duffel bag to the elevator. As the door slid closed, cutting off my view of the penthouse, a single tear finally escaped and rolled down my cheek. Finding a place to stay on short notice on a Saturday night was nearly impossible. I ended up renting a tiny, cramped room in an old apartment building near the art studio. The walls were thin, the radiator clanked and hissed like an angry beast, and the air smelled faintly of damp wood and old paper. But it was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. I sat on the edge of the narrow, stiff bed, wrapping my arms around my knees. The cold in the room seemed to seep directly into my bones. My stomach began to ache, a dull, familiar pain that usually signified my stress levels were too high. Normally, Julian would notice immediately. He would frown, disappear into the kitchen, and return with a mug of perfectly heated milk, sitting on the edge of the bed to make sure I drank every drop. "You don't take care of yourself," he would murmur, his voice low and exasperated, but his fingers would be incredibly gentle as they brushed the stray hairs from my forehead. I buried my face in my hands.
Stop thinking about him.
"He's not yours." Suddenly, the air in front of me began to shimmer. The invisible comments appeared again, scrolling faster now, as if a live broadcast had just hit a dramatic climax. "Guys, Julian is back at the penthouse. Oh my God, look at his face. He looks absolutely terrifying. He saw the keys. He's reading the note right now. Wait, why is he pulling his tie off like he's about to suffocate? He's calling her." My phone, lying on the mattress beside me, suddenly began to buzz. The screen lit up with a name that used to bring me so much joy, Julian. My finger hovered over the green button. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to answer, to hear his voice, to tell him I was cold and my stomach hurt, and I wanted to come home. But then another comment floated past. "Don't answer, Mia. If you answer, you're just going to crawl back to him, and then he'll have to reject you to your face. Save some dignity." My heart clenched. The commenter was right. If I answered, what would I say? That I left because some invisible letters in the air told me he didn't love me? He would think I was insane. And if he told me, politely and coldly, that he agreed it was time to part ways, it would break whatever was left of my spirit. I switched the phone to silent and turned it face down on the mattress. The phone continued to buzz, its vibration humming against the cheap wooden headboard. 10 times. 20 times. Eventually, the screen went dark. I curled up on the hard bed, pulling the thin blanket over my shoulders. I watched the comments flicker on the ceiling like dying stars. "He's leaving the penthouse. He's getting into his car. Where is he going? Is he going to Evelyn's? Probably. The author is finally getting the main couple together. Mia is officially out of the picture." I pulled the blanket tighter, closing my eyes against the light of the words. "Good night, Julian," I whispered into the empty, cold room.
Goodbye.
Monday morning arrived with a gray, relentless rain that turned the city streets into slick mirrors. I arrived at the art studio early, my eyes heavy with dark circles. I hadn't slept more than a few hours over the weekend, and my sensitive stomach was still protesting the cheap instant noodles I had forced myself to eat. "Mia, are you alright?" Mrs. Gable asked, looking at me with concern as I set up the easels for the morning class. "You look like a ghost." "I'm fine, Mrs. Gable. Just a bit of a cold," I lied, keeping my voice light. "If it gets too much, please let me know. I can cover the afternoon session for you." "Thank you. I'll be okay." I forced myself to focus on the children. They were loud, bright, and full of chaotic energy, which was exactly what I needed to distract my mind. I helped them mix paints, corrected their brushstrokes, and laughed when one of them accidentally painted a blue mustache on his own face. But the distraction was temporary. Every time the door to the studio opened, my heart leaped into my throat, only to sink back down when it was just another parent or delivery courier. The comments had been quiet most of the morning, only occasionally flickering with idle chatter. The rain is so romantic. Perfect weather for the main couple's reunion dinner. I heard Julian's family is hosting a welcome-back banquet for Evelyn tonight. Julian will definitely be there. Mia is just quietly working her little job. Honestly, it's better this way. A normal life suits her. At 11:30 a.m., during the class break, the front door of the art studio opened again. A cold gust of wind swept into the warm lobby, bringing with it the scent of rain, wet asphalt, and expensive cedarwood. I froze, the paintbrush in my hand dripping a single drop of yellow acrylic onto my apron. I slowly turned around. Julian stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his usual pristine, perfectly styled look. His expensive black overcoat was damp with rain, and his dark hair, usually combed back neatly, was slightly messy, damp strands clinging to his forehead. His tie was gone, the top two buttons of his charcoal dress shirt undone, revealing the sharp line of his collarbone.
But it was his eyes that terrified me.
They were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, hollow shadows, and filled with a wild, desperate intensity that I had never seen in him before. The entire studio seemed to go quiet. The children stopped chattering, sensing the sudden, heavy tension in the room. "Mia," Julian said. His voice was hoarse, rough, and trembling slightly. I gripped the edge of the easel to steady my shaking knees. "Julian, what are you doing here?" Before he could answer, Mrs. Gable stepped forward, looking at him protectively. "Sir, this is a private classroom. If you're not a parent, I need to speak with my girlfriend," Julian interrupted, his eyes locked onto me, completely ignoring the older woman. "Please." The word girlfriend sent a sharp pang through my chest. Oh my God, he found her. Why does he look like he hasn't slept in 3 days? Is he here to officially break it off? He could have just done that over the phone. Why make a scene? "Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice barely audible. "It's okay. I'll step outside with him for a moment." "Are you sure, Mia?" she asked, looking at Julian's tense, imposing figure with suspicion.
"Yes."
"I'll be right back." I wiped my hands on my apron, took it off, and followed Julian out into the narrow, quiet hallway of the commercial building. The moment the door closed behind us, Julian turned to face me. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively as if to grab my shoulder, but he stopped himself a fraction of an inch away. His fingers trembled in the air before he slowly let them drop back to his side. The movement was so small, but to me, it was glaringly obvious. The tactical lean, the instinctive withdrawal. Even now, when he was furious or desperate, he couldn't bring himself to touch me. "Why did you leave?" he demanded, his voice low and tight, vibrating with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "Why did you pack your things and disappear? I called you 50 times, Mia. 50 times. I leaned back against the cold wall of the hallway, wrapping my arms around myself to keep from shivering. "I left a note, Julian. I thought it was very clear." "A note?" He let out a harsh, dry laugh that sounded like it physically hurt him. "You left a 3-line note on the counter and took your things. You left the jewelry, the clothes, the keys. You left everything. Do you have any idea what I felt when I walked into that empty apartment?" "You should have been relieved," I said quietly, looking down at his damp leather shoes. "Our agreement was for a year. The year is up. Your family won't bother you about arranged marriages anymore." Julian's breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" "Evelyn Cole is back," I said, finally raising my eyes to meet his. The name hung in the air between us, cold and heavy. Julian's eyes widened slightly, a look of profound confusion crossing his face. "Evelyn? What does she have to do with you leaving?" "Don't lie to me, Julian," I said, my voice cracking as the tears I had been holding back for 2 days began to gather in my eyes. "She's your childhood sweetheart. She's the one the one your family wants for you, the one you've been waiting for. You only dated me to buy time until she came back. I was just a convenient prop. I was a shield."
"Yes. Tell him."
"Let him know you aren't stupid. Look at his face. He's trying to think of an excuse." The male lead is caught. But wait. Why does he look so completely lost? Julian stared at me, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "A shield?
"Akumbanin prop, Mia."
Who in the hell told you that?" "It doesn't matter who told me," I whispered, a tear slipping down my cheek. "It's the truth. You never wanted me to touch you. Every time I hugged you, every time I tried to kiss you, you leaned back. You endured me because you're polite, because you made a promise to let me hug you when we first started dating. But you hated it. You hated how clingy I was." Julian looked as if I had physically struck him. The color drained from his face, leaving him utterly pale. I hated it, he whispered, his voice cracking. You think I hated you touching me? Yes, I sobbed, the dam finally breaking.
I saw it.
I felt it. The way your waist shifted away, the way your shoulders tightened. You were just enduring me. And on Saturday, you didn't even come to pick me up because you went to the airport to get her. I waited in the cold, Julian. I waited, and you didn't come. Julian closed the distance between us in a single, desperate stride. He didn't hesitate this time. His hands flew to my face, his warm palms cupping my cheeks, his thumbs gently wiping away my tears. His touch was so intense, so desperate, that it took my breath away. Mia, listen to me, he said, his voice trembling with a raw, fierce emotion that shook me to my core. Listen to me very carefully. I didn't go to the airport for Evelyn. I went because my grandfather used her return to trap me into a family meeting. He told me if I didn't show up, he would use his influence to shut down your art studio. I gasped, staring at him through my tears. I went there to end it, Mia. Julian continued, his eyes burning into mine. I want to tell my grandfather, my parents, and everyone else that I have a woman I love, a woman I am going to marry, and that if they ever dared to touch a single hair on your head, I would tear the Hart group down to the ground. I didn't even look at Evelyn. I didn't say a single word to her. He swallowed hard, his grip on my cheeks tightening slightly, as if he were afraid I would vanish if he let go. I was delayed because my grandfather had a sudden hypertensive crisis when I told him I was marrying you. He fainted. The doctors had to be called and the family blocked the exits. I spent hours trying to break through their security just to get back to you. By the time I got free, it was past midnight. I drove like a madman to the studio, but you were already gone. I went to the penthouse, and it was empty. His voice broke, a single, heavy tear escaping his eye and rolling down his cheek. You think I leaned back because I hated you touching me? He let out a ragged, self-deprecating laugh. Mia? I leaned back because I was trying not to lose my mind. I froze.
What?
I am a man, Mia, he whispered, his forehead gently resting against mine, his breath warm and sweet against my skin. A man who has been madly, desperately in love with you since the moment I saw you crying in that stairwell.
I didn't ask you to date me to block my family.
I used my family as an excuse because I was too terrified to tell you how I really felt. You were so bright, so innocent, and I was just a cold, ruthless businessman who didn't know how to love someone without destroying them. My heart stopped. The hallway, the rain outside, the comments, everything seemed to fade into a distant blur. When we started dating, you asked me if you could hug me. I said yes, but I had to make a promise to myself to respect your boundaries. Julian continued, his voice thick with unshed tears. Every time you launched yourself into my arms, every time you crawled into my lap, every time you begged for a kiss. Do you have any idea how much self-control it took for me not to pull you against me and never let you go? I leaned back because if I didn't, I would have devoured you. I was afraid my hunger, my obsession with you, would scare you away. I was holding myself back, enduring the torture of wanting you so badly while trying to be the perfect, respectful gentleman you deserved. He pulled back slightly, looking down at me with an expression of such pure, vulnerable devotion that it made my chest ache. You are not a prop, Mia. You are my entire world. If you leave me, I don't have a life to go back to. The invisible comments in front of my eyes suddenly began to spin out of control. What? Oh my God. The tactical lean was self-restraint. He loved her the whole time. He used his family as an excuse just to get close to her. The readers are the real clowns here. We got the plot completely wrong. Kiss him. Mia, kiss him right now. My heart is going to explode. I stared at Julian. The warmth of his hands on my face seeped into my skin, melting the ice that had frozen my heart over the weekend. You love me? I whispered, my voice trembling. More than my own life, Julian said, his eyes dark with an intensity that made my breath hitch. I have never wanted anyone else. I will never want anyone else. Please, Mia, come home. Don't punish me like this. I looked at his damp hair, his exhausted eyes, and the sheer desperation radiating from every line of his body. All my doubts, all my fears, all the toxic comments that had poisoned my mind over the past 2 days, they evaporated in the warmth of his gaze. I raised my hands, wrapping my fingers around his wet collar, and pulled him down to me. I'm sorry, I whispered against his lips. I'm so sorry I didn't trust you. Julian didn't answer with words. The moment our lips met, his restraint finally snapped. His arms wrapped around my waist, lifting me slightly off the ground as he pulled me flush against his chest. The kiss was not the gentle, polite peck he usually gave me. It was deep, possessive, and filled with a fierce, ravenous hunger that left me breathless. He kissed me as if he were trying to pour a year's worth of silent devotion, desperate longing, and terrified agony into a single touch. My fingers tangled in his damp hair, pulling him closer, my heart pounding wildly against his ribs. The coldness of the winter rain on his coat melted against the heat of our embrace. When he finally pulled back to let me breathe, his forehead rested against mine, his chest heaving. "Don't ever run away from me again," he growled softly, his voice possessive and thick with emotion. "If you do, I will hunt you down to the ends of the earth." I let out a soft, watery laugh, my arms still tightly looped around his neck. "I won't. I promise." I looked up, and for the first time in 2 days, the invisible comments were gone. The air in front of me was clear, bright, and completely free of the opinions of strangers. I didn't need them anymore anyway. I had my own story, and for the first time, I knew exactly who the male lead was, and that he belonged entirely to me. Julian refused to let me stay at the art studio for another minute. After a brief, quiet conversation with Mrs. Gable, who looked remarkably pleased with the outcome, he wrapped his dry cashmere coat around my shoulders and practically carried me to his car. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, but it was a completely different kind of silence than the one that had suffocated me on the subway. Our fingers were tightly laced together over the center console. Julian held my hand with a grip, so tight it was almost painful, as if he were still convincing himself that I was actually sitting next to him. Every few minutes, his eyes would dart over to me, checking to make sure I hadn't disappeared. When we finally returned to the penthouse, the air felt different. The cold, sterile museum feel was gone, replaced by a warm, familiar comfort. Julian locked the front door behind us, set his keys on the counter next to my crumpled note, and immediately pulled me back into his arms. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. "I missed you," he murmured, his voice rough. "The apartment was so cold without you." "I missed you too," I whispered, wrapping my arms around his waist. My stomach hurt the whole weekend. Julian pulled back instantly, his hands gripping my shoulders as his brow furrowed with deep concern. "Your stomach? Did you eat? Have you had anything warm?" "Only instant noodles," I admitted sheepishly. "And the radiator in my new room didn't work very well." A look of intense self-reproach crossed his face. Without another word, he scooped me up in his arms, ignoring my small gasp of surprise, and carried me into the bedroom. He placed me gently on the bed, pulling the thick, warm duvet over my legs. "Stay here," he ordered softly. "Don't move." I watched him disappear into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with a mug of perfectly heated milk, a spoonful of honey stirred into it. He sat on the edge of the mattress, holding the mug to my lips.
Drink.
I took a slow sip, the warm, sweet liquid instantly soothing the ache in my stomach and the coldness in my chest. As I drank, Julian watched me, his gaze incredibly soft, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. "Mia," he said quietly, his voice filled with a gentle, solemn promise. "From now on, there are no boundaries. You can hug me whenever you want. You can kiss me whenever you want. You can crawl into my lap during a board meeting and I won't care. Just never doubt my feelings for you again." I set the half-empty mug on the nightstand and crawled into his lap, wrapping my arms tightly around his neck. Julian's arms immediately locked around my waist, pulling me so close there was no space left between us. He leaned his head against my shoulder, letting out a long, shuddering sigh of pure relief. "I won't," I whispered, burying my face in his neck, breathing in the scent of cedarwood and warm milk. "I love you, Julian." "I love you, Mia," he murmured, his lips pressing a soft, lingering kiss against my temple. "Always." In the quiet warmth of the bedroom, surrounded by the man who loved me more than his own life, I finally felt at peace. The comments had been wrong about everything. I was never a supporting character destined to be cast aside. In Julian Hart's world, I was, and always would be, the only protagonist.